They always tell me to stay positive, but now I'm going to go in the different direction because we're going to speak about the game called Negative Atmosphere. And now when I'm thinking about it, it's so stupid and lame joke that I will probably lose my job. Anyway, I'm super happy to be able to speak to Calvin from Sunscorched Studios. Hi Calvin, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
So, your game is set in space, and I'm very curious your opinion about one thing. What makes space, cosmos, so great setting for all horror stories?
So I would say space is a fantastic place to tell scary stories. In space, there's just limitless dead void, which will kill you in minutes if you don't have the right equipment. So obviously this confines all the characters to a single space, and they can't leave it, which forces situations which you could otherwise avoid by basically just running away. Building's on fire, I'm going to run away. In space, you can't run away from your ship because you'll just suffocate. It gets scarier because the distances in space are so massive, millions upon trillions of kilometers. So because you're only probably maximum 2-3 meters, your ship might be 2 kilometers long. It's still nothing compared to 100 trillion miles when you're dealing with faster than light distances. So you're already going to feel tiny and insignificant. And obviously it's terrifying being that small and that insignificant. And when you have to travel such large spaces, you have to bring all your supplies with you, all of your food, all of your water, all of your resources and things to repair things. And often, if you're traveling a long period of time, it takes 2 years, 1 year to get to Mars and 1 year to get back, for example. You're going to result in a thing called resource scarcity. So your characters are always going to be poorly equipped, barely equipped for the job. You're probably not going to have guns, because why would you need a gun? And with everything on the ship designed for efficiency, the space is very fragile, which basically results in the environment being just as dangerous, or perhaps the most dangerous thing. Doors will crush you, pipes will explode, electronic things will spark, because they're not meant to be stabbed, shot, or splattered with blood. So when the ship itself is so fragile and falling apart, and it feels alive like its own character, you literally can't trust the floor you're standing on, because it might just fall through, give way, and kill you. That results in everything being terrifying and scary, because you just simply can't trust anything. And all those factors combined together is just like the perfect recipe for making a setting that's scary.
And I understand that we'll find a lot of this in your game, Negative Atmosphere. Tell me more about how you build that atmosphere of loneliness and isolation.
Absolutely. So I will just to add a bit onto the previous question, I'll say that the ship that the game's set on, the TRH Rozanov, is a 2 kilometer long ship. It's way past its use by date. It's like 50 plus years old. So everything on it was already falling apart. Now it really falling apart. So trusting that environment is something that we really do want to make the player feel scared about, and that really helps us drive home the constant threat, especially when you mix it in with all the 3D audio systems that we're using. So we actually use a system for the game which is modified from a VR audio system. So the game's not VR, but using VR audio basically means that we can have 3D positional audio. You can hear if an enemy's above you or below you or by the sides, or when they're in the vents, they're more muffled than they are when they're actually in the corridor. So by using this sound design, you know something's here. Something's there. And the scariest thing I always find is something you can't see but you can hear, because your imagination runs wild. So knowing that they're actually in the vents but you cannot see them, you have to walk down this really long stretch of corridor and you can only really see the end but you can't actually see anything else. That's terrifying, because you've got to traverse a space in which you basically know something's out to get you, but you don't know what it is, where it is. You just know that it's close. And we use a lot of techniques and devices from film to build an atmosphere as well of loneliness and constant threat. So a great example is, you want to say that somebody's lonely. Well, prove to the player or the person watching that they're the only person there. This is a third-person game. So for the entire duration of the game, Edwards, the protagonist, he's constantly in view, and often he's the only, and I will make this a very important distinction, the only living human on screen. A few large spaces in the ship are very empty, and that's basically a smaller scale thing of the previous question, where it's a massive empty room. It should be full of people, but it just isn't, like a cafeteria or a hub space where things are being transferred. And then we do the complete opposite of that almost immediately after, where it's a claustrophobic, dark, crushing corridor that's winding and bending. So when you mix these really long, winding, bending corridors with large open spaces, you go, this is horrifying. this is horrifying, because it goes, I'm crushed in, I can't see anything. I can see everything, and I don't like what I see. So it's a mix of those things. But add in ambient and sound design, which you may be able to see if you watch our Save and Sound showcase. We did an audio breakdown where we showcased how we did all that sound design. And mix that with dynamic music, which kind of changes depending on what you see, and you get a very convincing system, because you're constantly being oppressed on the visual front, the actual navigation front, and on the sound design front, and you just basically, it doesn't let up. And that is what's so scary and constant and terrifying, but also makes you feel so alone, because it's all aimed at you, no one else. You can go on Steam and search Negative Atmosphere, add us to your wish list. That's really important, as it's great for visibility. You can also join our Discord and see all of our social media channels. And I will say one final thing as well. Obviously, with the way that the game has been developed, and we are still developing it, there's no set release date yet. But when there is a release date, when we know it's coming out, we'll be sure to let you know. We've been working on this since 2019, and then
Really?
all of a sudden, so we made the first pitch in 2019. Obviously, we've been in the process of just trying to get funding for it, so we've crowdfunded everything that we've done for this so far. And we end up in a situation where everybody's like, oh, Summer Game Fest, oh, Dead Space remake, Callisto Protocol, let's make another Dead Space. We're all going to make a Dead Space game. I'm like, what the hell? Why have all of this all of a sudden? You know, I mean, obviously I'm not complaining, more Dead Space is brilliant.